A shell lands in the sand just ahead of the leading tank. Dust lifts and drifts across the frame. The tanks keep moving, white kangaroos painted on their hulls and turrets. The narrator calls them British tanks. They aren't. They are Italian medium tanks, captured weeks earlier and now crewed by Australians advancing into Cyrenaica in January 1941. In the opening phase of Operation Compass, elements of the 6th Australian Division Cavalry Regiment recovered Italian medium tanks taken at Bardia and put them back into action. They were used during the capture of Tobruk and in the advance west along the Libyan coast. They didn't plan this. They used them because they had to. From Bardia to Tobruk. The assault on Bardia, 3 to 5 January 1941, was the 6th Australian Division's first major action of the war. The Italian 23 Corps collapsed. More than 36,000 prisoners were taken, along with artillery, transport and armoured vehicles. Among the captured equipment at Bardia were 12 Italian medium tanks, Fiat Ansaldo M13 40s, together with several older M11 39s, perhaps 2 or 3, taken in earlier fighting during the advance across Cyrenaica. A squadron of the 6th Division Cavalry Regiment, equipped primarily with Bren carriers, and a handful of worn-out Vickers-like tanks, brought a number of these captured machines into temporary service. Its commander, Major Denzil MacArthur Onslow, had large white kangaroos painted on their hulls and turrets to reduce the risk of friendly fire. With Bardia secure, Commonwealth forces advanced on Tobruk, the principal port of Cyrenaica. Tobruk fell on 21-22 January 1941. British infantry tank Mark II Matildas provided the main armoured support, but in smaller numbers, perhaps up to 10 serviceable vehicles at peak availability. Captured Italian M13 40s and a few surviving M11 39s, operated by Australian crews, were also employed. Mechanical breakdowns and shortages of spare parts quickly reduced that number. Italian tanks in Australian hands. At Tobruk, Australian troops operated Italian tanks in combat under their own command, rather than as attachments within British armoured units. Photographs show Australian soldiers with M11 39 and M13 40 tanks captured at Bardia and prepared for further operations, the kangaroo insignia clearly visible. Only a few were serviceable at any time. Reliability was uneven, and spare parts scarce, so their use was selective, including alongside units of the 19th Australian Infantry Brigade. The M11 39 mounted a 37mm gun in the hull, with a small two-man turret carrying machine guns. The later M13 40 carried a 47mm gun in a fully rotating turret. Armour on both types was modest, up to 30mm, vulnerable to anti-tank fire. 125 horsepower diesel engines gave a road speed of about 30 km per hour, reduced in desert conditions. Inside, the tanks were cramped and airless in the North African heat. Vision was restricted and the internal layout followed Italian practice. Crews had to learn unfamiliar controls and gunnery arrangements without formal training. There was no time to train on them properly. What they learned under fire. Westward advance. After Tobruk, the 6th Australian Division advanced toward Derna and the approaches to Benghazi. The remaining captured tanks accompanied the movement in small numbers. Their service was short. Mechanical failures increased, maintenance was difficult, and by early February 1941, the captured vehicles were withdrawn as British supplied armour became available. Under fire. No detailed first-hand account seems to have survived describing what it was like inside these tanks in action. No tank versus tank engagement is recorded. However, what is certain is that they were used. And it seems as though they were used effectively. The newsreel footage showed kangaroo-marked Italian tanks advancing under fire. At Tobruk, That fire would probably have come from Italian anti-tank guns, anti-tank rifles or field artillery. Against such weapons, 30mm of riveted armour would have offered limited protection. Even a non-penetrating hit could trigger internal spalling, shearing rivet heads loose inside the fighting compartment and killing or wounding the crew. These were captured enemy machines, pressed into service because they were available. Controls were unfamiliar. Gunnery and movement were mastered in the field. The episode was brief, but it remains a clear example of Australian adaptability in the opening months of the war. The white kangaroo on the turret was more than a recognition mark. It represented Australian ingenuity and the bravery to fight in captured enemy tanks and keep advancing under fire. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, commenting and subscribing. Until next time.